You guys know we spend a significant amount of our lives at work, right? What I find is that if I actually look good, I feel good, and I'm a lot more confident. Now, your average scrubs, which I'm wearing right now, horribly fitting, right? Itchy. They don't absorb sweat very well, so you can see the patches whenever they appear. And we look quite rugged at work, to be honest. Hence why the term we always say that it's like working in pajamas. Now, that's where figs come in. So I'm wearing the fig scrub right now. So this fits a lot better around the shoulders and the arm and including the lats itself. It looks more professional, it is more comfortable, and it's more functional as well. You've got the 2 pockets over the left side of the chest, and they use this antimicrobial tech to produce the scrub itself, so it absorbs sweat better and it doesn't become smelly and stinky basically. Head over to wearfigs.com and use the code FIGSUK for 15% off your first order. Let's head back to the podcast.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Scrubbed In Show. I hope you've all been keeping well. This is the new season after a small hiatus, but super glad to have someone I've known for a while now, someone who I've been, keen to get onto the podcast, but he's been super busy for obvious reason. It's Paul, Dr. Paul Jewell, who is the CEO and co-founder of Assuric, who has been flying recently. In essence, if you don't know who they are already, they're a compliance platform for digital health solutions, super mission driven, really helping clinician health tech founders and entrepreneurs with clinical safety, adoption, deployment of the tools they're building. Not only that, he's a medic by background, clinician, I believe completed all the way up to IMT, early stage of his registrar career, and sprinkled in between, he managed to get himself into EF. He's a data scientist, and he's a tech enthusiast. But one of the things I love about Paul, before I go into it, is like, he is an amazing guy for support and helping hand. Like, the amount of questions I've asked him behind the scenes on WhatsApp is like incredible. And like, he's not charging me, he's not doing anything, just purely to support and kind of advance the whole ecosystem. So absolute pleasure to have you on the show, Paul. How are you, buddy?
Welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks very much, Abdul Ams. It's a pleasure to be here. And like you said, long time coming, and it's an absolute pleasure to kick off the return of the Scrubbed In podcast. So yeah,
thank you, man.
Excited to get into it.
So there's a lot we want to cover. We don't have much time. Tell us kind of the early stages of your career, kind of the motivation to study medicine, kind of the early years of being a clinician. How was that all for you?
Yeah. So went straight into it, medical school, straight from school. Always wanted to do medicine, interested in kind of science and maths, always wanted a bit of an intellectual challenge. And a big factor was my parents were both doctors.
Oh, nice.
So had a heavy influence, which is probably not uncommon for medics, but I mean, it's a testament to how much they enjoyed the job. They're both retired now, living the life. But I feel like now potentially parents might encourage their children less to go into medicine, but at the time they were, and we can probably get into that, but they were super enthusiastic. It was a great fit for me, and I loved it. I loved studying medicine. I loved working as a doctor. If I had my time again, I would definitely highly consider studying medicine again. Other options that I think align with what I'm into is things like maths, engineering, computer science. There's some of the other things that would, or dropping out and starting my own company at the age of 18 in the kind of YC style way. But yeah, so I studied medicine, loved it, was really into it, was very motivated to be a doctor. Did my foundation years in London, Imperial, which again, I absolutely loved. F1, F2, finally kind of putting that into practice, everything you've learned, actually working with real patients. Yeah, I found it great. And I had so many good memories from those years, so many great friends from those like formative F1 years. And I was one of those kind of very motivated, energetic, ambitious people. At the time, it was very much like wanting to be a cardiologist or into infectious disease, trying to play the game and rack up the presentations and the publication, and then like doing the exams, just churning through it. I mean, loads of people do this, but working your shifts and then like studying in the evening. I was just had so much energy back then. Now it's channeled into different things, but yeah, loved it. And then kind of always had a like feeling of wanting to do other things. So I was always interested in tech. Like at medical school, I was involved in kind of some digital health projects. At like F1, F2, I was always trying to improve like the tech around me. But I mean, it didn't really work. I was always complaining about Cerner and like trying to get someone to change Cerner and sending emails, but absolutely no chance. And that was when I first kind of felt a bit frustrated and like powerless to change, because I feel like at medical school you feel like you can do loads of things, you can start a society and do all these things, but actually in the real world you realize potentially how powerless you are to change things. And I think that started eating at me a little bit, and I always kind of had a bit of an itch to do my own thing. And then also like had other interests, so I didn't want to kind of sort of go straight through into IMT training. I went off and did an F3 year, which was at the time was like just becoming pretty popular. I think now it's like more common than not for people to take some time out. Although with the like competition places, that might have been changing a bit. But I went off and like I lived in Peru for a few months and studied tropical medicine. Went traveling around South America.
Wow.
And then I also did an ICU placement. And this is when I first started getting interested in AI. I'd always been a bit techie, tried to teach myself to code in my spare time. And then this is when I first took a dive into AI, because basically they had a problem around NG tube placements. For those who don't know, NG tubes are nasogastric tubes which go in through the nose and into the stomach, and they're used for multiple reasons, but primarily for feeding. And you have to make sure that it's placed correctly in the stomach and not accidentally placed into the lung. And this is, as you'll know, is a problem in healthcare, because you want to make sure that it's correctly placed. And a never event incident is if feeding goes into the lung, because patients can become incredibly unwell. And yeah, I was just kind of like playing around with AI models to try and assess the NG tube placement from the plain films and provide warnings. So, because there was an incident at the hospital I was working at a few months before, and then every X-ray had to be double checked by two people in the hospital. So they had a ridiculous policy to try and make sure it never happened again. So that's when I first got into AI and playing around with it. Anyway, sorry, I'm probably going into a bit too much detail. But
What's interesting is, what was that exposure like for AI? Because it seems like you are very early on exposed to AI versus AI now, when it's like basically everyone knows what AI is because of ChatGPT, and it's like, been a year or two. I suspect you are kind of ahead of the curve. Did you stumble across it? What does AI mean when you first discovered it? And how did you come to discover AI?
Yeah, it's a good question. So this was back in 2018. So
Wow.
Definitely like large language models. I mean, there might have been like GPT 1 or 2 back then, but definitely people didn't really know about them. So the AI I'm talking about that was becoming popular was neural networks, deep learning. And I was just playing around with like Python coding because I kind of found it interesting. And then I did some courses online, the classic Andrew Ng Coursera courses, using like at the time the models were CNNs, convoluted neural networks, and I just found it amazing because you could do things like show the AI, like do a model that could determine if it was a cat or a dog or something. These classic simple things. And then people were starting to do this in healthcare, especially in imaging and radiology. So that kind of really interested me, both from the point of view of the potential in healthcare and also just from a kind of intellectual curiosity. I was really fascinated by how they work from a technical point of view. I wanted to build them. But then because of the way clinical medicine works, nothing too much came out of it. I did a bit of a project, but kind of didn't do anything more. And then it's kind of IMT took over, and that was a real focus. So that kind of dropped off the radar for a bit after that.
So talk to us about the lead up to the moment then when you decide I'm not going to pursue further training till consultancy then. So you've done exams, IMT training. When does the switch flick and you say, I don't want this anymore?
So for me, I always enjoyed clinical medicine, and I still do. I still practice clinically. I do locum work. And I think clinical medicine is such a rewarding job. I mean, working directly with patients, thinking critically and diagnosing and seeing the results. Yeah, it's so rewarding. But of course, there are loads of challenges. And I'm always one of those people that also can be a bit bored of something and wants to try something new. And it was in my IMT years, I was sort of coming to the end of it, and I was weighing up whether to go into specialist training. And I was feeling a bit burnt out, and it wasn't necessarily because of long hours or overwork. It was more from the kind of monotony of just doing it, going into hospital every day. As you all know, a lot of the stuff you see on a day-to-day basis isn't incredibly exciting. and then when you do get the odd interesting patient, then you're like, yes, finally. But I also had this feeling that there was like an opportunity cost to me kind of continuing in medicine. I was becoming a bit disillusioned with the kind of typical NHS career path, and sort of progressing at the same rate as everyone, and not necessarily being recognized for putting in the effort or doing things well, compared to some people who maybe weren't as putting in as much effort. There wasn't that recognition, which kind of was frustrating. And I just thought, partly because of these things, like I tried to do in my spare time, I always thought, oh, this is good, but I can never fully commit to this because clinical work is so consuming. And I'm always in awe of people who do manage to do almost a full-time clinical job plus all these things on the side. That I find that baffling, because there's only so much headspace I have. But yeah, so essentially it got to that point when I was feeling a bit burnt out and a bit lost. And it wasn't immediately that I jumped into entrepreneurship. I went traveling, did the classic thing of taking some time out. And I think it's important just to highlight that for me, I've always been a very energetic, motivated person. And like when I'm interested in something, I can sink my teeth into it and find the work really rewarding. And this was true for a lot of clinical work and all the kind of side projects in cardiology or whatever it is. But then I was at this point when I was feeling really demotivated, and I was probably not uncommon for clinicians. So I just wanted to highlight that. I just didn't really know what I wanted to do, wasn't really motivated to go off and try something new. Didn't really know what to do, just felt a bit lost. Felt like I had potential, but didn't really know where to start. Went off traveling for 5 or 6 months, which was amazing, all around various places, but essentially kind of sunk my teeth into learning to surf as opposed to medicine or AI, which is a very welcome distraction. And then the kind of moment hit when I was kind of getting a bit bored of traveling after about 5 or so months and feeling like I need to get back into my career. And then that's when I thought, now's the opportunity to actually properly learn AI and coding. And that's when I kind of went off to, there's a bit of a story there, but essentially I really wanted to start learning more about it. And then a friend recommended a data science and software development bootcamp style course, which is 3 months intense course. And I thought that was perfect. So I ended up applying for that.
Amazing. I can tell, like, whatever you do, you'll be successful at it, because the fact they said, you sunk your teeth into surfing, you sunk your teeth into IMT and training, and like, you want to code, you go and sign yourself up to this 3-month boot camp, which I believe was in Berlin, right? So you do really get into the thick of it. So tell us a bit more kind of what happened after you kind of done this boot camp. I recall you were part of the Bite Labs fellowship. What happened next? Did you go back into clinical training? Did you kind of like go back traveling? What was that kind of phase of your career?
Yeah, so it was the boot camp that really kind of gave me that spark back and that energy, even more so potentially than clinical work, because I just absolutely loved the coding. And yes, it was in Berlin. Another thing I wanted to do was, while I had the opportunity to live in different places,
nice,
because another disadvantage of kind of working in the NHS is you are just going to be working in either completely random places in the UK and definitely not being able to work abroad. So I thought, here's another opportunity to live in a cool place while learning something I want to learn. And it was doing the kind of learning to code, learning about AI. This is also just when ChatGPT 3.5 came out during the course. So we actually we're learning how to build large language models, actually testing out LLMs as they're coming out. So it's like really good timing for me to get into it. And then another appeal of the course was you have to do a project. And then this kind of combined my clinical experience and like desire to solve problems in healthcare with my newfound technical abilities. And I ended up building a couple of tools. One was now an AI scribe. At the time, I didn't know anyone was doing this. There were a few people doing it at the time. But yeah, I was using like your classic speech to text models and then feeding it into 3.5 at the time and doing your prompt engineering. I mean, it's reasonably easy to do a good first pass of an AI scribe with you just taking models off the shelf and some prompting. And then I combined that with a clinical decision support tool, which again, using new techniques. So retrieval augmented generative AI or RAG, as people refer to, it was pretty new at the time. So I was using this novel technique to do clinical decision support. And this was essentially like fast guidelines lookup. So you could query a corpus of guidelines. So you could have your local guidelines or your international guidelines. And then you could also feed it to an LLM to kind of do some interpretation. So I ended up building that as well. And then after doing that, again, I didn't realize, firstly, I thought this was going to be a big thing, but at the time it was very early. So people were probably doing it, but they weren't being deployed. But then I had high conviction that both of these tools were going to change healthcare.
Yeah.
And that's when I was like, okay, now I feel like I've got what I need to start something. I feel like I've got that problem that other kind of clinicians have when you feel like you have to be an expert in something before you actually do something. Whereas now what I realize is you definitely don't need to be an expert in something. You just got to go for it and then you can pick it up as you go. But I feel like clinicians often fall into that trap of feeling like you've got to know. It's probably because of the way the medicine hierarchy works. But I realized, that I wanted to build this. And then I came back to the UK. And then I ended up seeing both Byte Labs and EF. And I applied to both, and they were both at the same time. And both were like a really good fit for me because Byte Labs, if people don't know, is a digital health fellowship. And it's kind of a part-time fellowship where you have some training specifically on digital health and you meet some amazing people. And I'm now one of the faculty on the program, which is great.
Amazing.
And then also Entrepreneur First, which is a bit different. But I can go into a bit about how EF works.
Yeah, let me set the tone. Like EF is super, super competitive. And it's like one of the most kind of renowned established accelerators in the world. Like amazing startups have come off the back of it. I remember once me and Ams applied as a team, and then they took us into like separate interviews and said, would you leave your co-founder and join? Yeah. And then we were like, I don't know, we were like, nah, this ain't happening. And then they're like, all right, cool, apply. And then
one of you said yes.
Yeah, I don't know. One of us said yes would have been in EF now, right?
I was sitting there thinking Abdul might say yes, and I might be the one that says no.
That's my experience of EF. And after that, I thought, you know what? How dare they try to break up this co-foundership? But yeah, it's like super coveted. But yeah, tell us kind of like, how you got in the process, super competitive, and kind of advice for other medics that are looking to get into a program like that.
Yeah, well, firstly, I think that's hilarious that they tried to split you up.
Yeah.
And secondly, it's partly because of the way EF works. It's a different kind of model of this kind of VC-backed accelerator where they want people to generally, so they accept teams, but they generally want people to apply as individuals. And they have this thing, it's like pre-team, pre-idea, which sounds a bit ridiculous, but you basically apply, you don't have a team, you don't have an idea. And for me, that was perfect because I definitely didn't really know anything about starting a company. I didn't have a co-founder. I did have an idea, so I was a bit confused at the start because I thought I wanted to build my scribe and decision support tool, and then they were a bit like, "Oh no, that's not how this works here. You've got to come up with a new idea." So, and then this model is a bit different to the likes of YC, Y Combinator, which is the most well-known of these kind of accelerators, whereby they very much value pre-formed teams who probably are working on an idea and have made a lot of progress, but also might pivot into something new. So EF has this different thesis, and I thought it was great. I think it's a bizarre process. I mean, going right to the interview process where they try and split you up, but during the program, you're obviously trying to find a co-founder. So there's this very strange, like, dating show, Love Island style first couple of months where you're chatting to people, finding out what you're literally like pulling people over for chats, and you're sort of finding out what they do. You're both assessing them as an individual, but also your ability to kind of come up with ideas and work together. And the idea is that you quickly form a team so that you can test that co-founding team. And then you just go hard at like an idea, see how you work together. If it's not working, just break up. And it's amazing because their thesis is that you can kind of come up with more innovative ideas if two people come together and you have that overlapping skill set and complementary skill set, which is amazing because like people go off to build completely different things to what you might expect because of the combination of different people. So yeah, I thought it was great, and for me, not only did it help you find a co-founder, which is one of the key value adds, but also it kind of, I felt like I've always been ambitious and had a sense of urgency, but I feel like it took it to another level. They would just like really instilled that confidence in you that you could build something big. I don't think I could think about building something as ambitious as we're building now at the time. So that I think is really important. And I absolutely loved it. And I'm more than happy to give anyone any tips. But to go back to your previous question, anyone thinking of applying, any clinicians, any doctors, I'd say go for it, especially if you're interested in founding. I think it's very competitive. I think clinicians, especially if they have those kind of founder tendencies, have done some interesting things. And a lot of clinicians have done loads of interesting things. Then you've got a really good shot. And I think there's no real downside, because ultimately, even if you fail in the sense of not finding a co-founder or not building something, or not getting funding, you still learn a huge amount. I think the rate of learning and the connections you make is kind of unparalleled for sure.
Paul, I've got two particular questions at this point. So we're living in times when a lot of clinicians are starting to transition careers, trying to move out of clinical work and everything. Now, there's a phase in your journey, right, where you spend a significant amount of time just upskilling yourself, doing courses, the Bite Lab fellowship and everything. How important is it for clinicians to spend a period of time upskilling themselves, or can you just jump straight into it? What do you think here? What's your opinion?
Yeah, I think if you asked me this a few years ago, I'd have a different answer.
Yeah.
But I definitely did the usual like badge collection that clinicians love to do, that kind of validation of completing a course. So, I mean, I during COVID, whilst working in IMT, I ended up doing an MBA online.
Wow.
Partly because it's like one of these online MBAs. They say it's a proper MBA, but it's not. Like,
was it the Quantic one?
Yeah, it's the Quantic one.
I got into that and dropped out of that.
Yeah, so I ended up doing that. But then again, I felt like I was just collecting some sort of badge. And you kind of feel like you need that validation before you can actually go on to do something. And now I definitely have different advice of just going for something. You don't need to collect badges in order to, and if anything, it can slow you up, and it can be a negative.
Yeah, absolutely.
For example, I mean, I think the classic example is, and this is not to put down anyone who's done these kind of masters, but I think masters are amazing, and I in the future, if I have the time, I'd love to do kind of more higher education. But doing things like a master's in entrepreneurship, for example, I'm sure you learn loads of useful things, but it'd be far better to use both that time and money to just starting something that you're interested in, and you would learn, I think, more than you would from doing the masters in a month than you would the whole year. So that I definitely think just getting started doing things, there's no replacement to that kind of learning, I think.
Let me give you two options and you have to pick one. Okay, so do a master's in entrepreneurship and you come out with a big certificate, or ship a product but it 100% fails within 12 months. Which one do you do?
Definitely the latter. For sure.
There you go. You've got it there.
Yeah, for sure. And then also, I mean, as you'll know, failure is completely normal.
Yeah.
I mean, people are kind of failing in all kinds of ways on an almost daily basis. You just got to realize like what to do from it, how to learn from it, and that the learning experience you would get from something like that is so sort of, it just has such a big impact, so much bigger an impact than, say, doing a degree, that I feel like that would last you for much longer. And like, for example, with Assuric, we've had multiple failures along the way, but it hasn't kind of stopped us. And anything, it's made us kind of go from strength to strength. So.
Yeah. Hardest thing for medics to swallow right now, everything that you're saying.
Yeah.
You mentioned Assuric, which is kind of a nice segue into kind of the company you founded off the back of EF. Tell us a bit more about what Assuric is, what you do, but I know a lot of listeners are probably like dying curious to know, is like kind of like, as a new startup, how do you then look after compliance for companies like Heidi, Tandem, Accurex? Like, what is it that you did versus competitors to land these big gigs? You know, why there was, a startup that's raised over like 50 million recently, come to a small startup, you guys are growing like wildfire. Everyone's talking about it. I have my own theory as to why you're doing so well. But like, tell us a bit more about kind of the, Assuric, why you picked that, how it's going, and how you're securing these awesome contracts with these amazing companies.
Yeah, I'll go back to kind of where the genesis of Assuric came from. And it goes back to EF. So like I said, joined EF really wanting to build an AI scribe company. And then going back to kind of how I found my co-founder. So me and Matt, we matched on the first day. And that is actually quite rare. So it takes teams a bit longer. And we're also the longest standing kind of team in our batch.
Nice.
And this was because we were both very aligned in what we wanted to do. So Matt is my incredible co-founder. He isn't a medic. He's a software engineer. He worked at Palantir for a few years. Very, very smart guy. And he just came into EF really wanting to build in healthcare because like he had his own frustrations with the healthcare system, more from being a kind of service user than whereas me being like internal. So we both kind of had our frustrations with healthcare and the technology in healthcare and wanting to solve those problems. And when we first joined, it wasn't like, oh, let's build Assuric. We had loads of different ideas about what we wanted to build and change. And I think both having, I mean, people talk about that North Star. We just have a kind of aligned North Star in wanting to build in healthcare and solve problems in healthcare. I mean, that's quite general, but that kind of held us strongly together, even when we had disagreements about where we were going with certain ideas. And we were initially building things. Firstly, I tried to sell Matt the AI scribe.
I was going to say, what were the ideas that didn't make it?
But he wasn't buying it. He wasn't buying it. If we went through it, we could have...
Bet you're thanking him now.
We could have been Heidi or Tandem. Who knows? But yeah, but I actually, now I'm quite glad because it is a competitive space. So I don't know if we...
Incredibly but you get to serve... In a way, I love what you're building is like, I have like that shiny object syndrome. I want to build it all.
Yeah.
Sometimes when you try to build it all, you end up building nothing. Whereas you get to work with all of these startups across the board, which then comes on to my next question. Tell us a bit more about the importance of compliance in healthcare, in markets like the UK, US. A lot of people try, they try and be sneaky and do some stuff, don't do some stuff. There's lockdown contracts. But like, what are you seeing from the inside? Why is it super important? Let's spend some time on that.
Yeah, definitely. I'll tie that into just like coming onto how we came up to it.
Yeah, exactly.
I was taking my time to get there, but essentially we were building various things, and then we just realized that compliance was an incredibly important, not a nice to have, but a must have. Table stakes in terms of getting a product deployed in healthcare. I already had some experience of it because I already worked a bit in digital health. I already did my kind of clinical safety officer training. I knew about clinical safety, and I can come on to that in a bit more detail. But so through trying to launch our own initial products, and we were in kind of primary care, automating administrative processes. This is one of our earlier ideas. We built some prototypes, and we were looking at deploying them, and then we kind of gain more understanding about the needs. And I mean, all of these requirements are there for good reason. Ultimately, healthcare is a very high stakes industry. It's very safety conscious for the right reasons. Ultimately, there are people at the end of it, potentially lives at stake if things go wrong. So that is why and there's sort of a list of things going wrong ultimately where regulations have been born out of to try and reduce those things happening again. And so it's all there for good reason. And to go on to your question about why it's important, especially now with lots of software companies, AI. Firstly, you're processing patient data. Patient data is very sensitive. You have to build trust with healthcare organizations and patients. And as a result, there's lots of regulations that you have to meet when it comes to patient data protection and security. There's a lot around safety. So not only is there a risk of, say, patient data being leaked or something happening to it, then you also have to make sure that the risk of patient harm is reduced. And there's various regulations and standards that protect this, from the NHS's requirements to medical device regulations for software as a medical device, and a whole raft of other important considerations around accessibility, usability, interoperability, the NHS's requirements. So we kind of learned about, we already had a bit of an understanding, but we learned about the kind of burden this has, especially on startups. again, I'm not disputing the importance of it, but it's definitely a kind of a huge burden for early stage companies. And we were kind of doing our digging around how companies were managing this. So we ended up speaking to kind of 50 plus health tech companies, and it was a universal pain point. Everyone complained about it, the time spent on it, the huge costs. We looked at kind of some of the existing solutions that were out there in terms of often a lot of expensive consultancy, and I'm not bashing consultants because they definitely have a role to play, but we were surprised at the expense of their offering and the kind of tools available in terms of a huge amount of like templated documentation, spreadsheets, nothing automated, nothing connected. And we just felt there had to be another way. And this was when we were kind of pivoting out of our like AI and GP practices idea. And we were like, this is a really interesting problem space because it's universally sort of hated by startups, health techs. It's very important. It's kind of essential. It's not going anywhere. And also, we're very impact driven. We felt like if we could solve this problem and ultimately reduce the timelines of new technology being deployed in healthcare, whilst also making sure it's obviously safe, secure, and effective, then we could have an even greater kind of impact. And that was very, very appealing to us. So it kind of ticked a lot of boxes, and we just wanted to dive into it. And the more we got into it, the more we learned about it, the more we realized that there was a huge opportunity to build something of value.
So Paul, so you've talked about the importance of compliance and everything, right? But for all the potential founders listening to this, all the founders listening to this, when is the right time? I'm going to say to reach out to Assuric. When is the right time? Is it from day zero when we've got the concept in mind, or is it once we've got a product built? When do we start all of this?
Yeah, well, I think it's never too early to reach out to Assuric, that's for sure. But I mean, in all seriousness, like I get a lot of kind of questions from very early stage, like founders, maybe they're just working on an idea, they haven't even built a product yet. I'm more than happy to kind of give some advice and pointers, share some resources, put them on the right track. So it's never too early to start learning about the requirements, especially when it comes to things like medical device regulation. You have to have an understanding and a strategy of what you're building. And obviously you're not going to know everything from day one, but you do have to have like an understanding of what the steps are. And to keep it simply, first, the point of call is to work out whether you're building a medical device or not, because the regulatory burden and pathways that you have to go through are much greater than if you're not building a medical device. For listeners who aren't sure of what these terms are, I'll just briefly explain them. But a medical device is fundamentally initially hardware. So your classic medical devices are things like your surgical tools, hip replacements, these kind of things. And then that definition is extended to include software that has a medical purpose. And this is called software as a medical device. And the medical purpose is things like diagnosis, treatment. So diagnosis being classic examples like your radiology diagnostic tools that use AI, or you can use other kind of predictive tools or clinical decision support that suggest diagnoses, things like that. But you also have a lot of digital health solutions that aren't medical device because perhaps they don't diagnose, but they involved in, say, communication or just electronic health record systems and things like that. So having an understanding of exactly what you're building, where it's going to be used, and what the regulatory requirements and pathways look like, I think is important from an early stage. So it's never, I think with all these things, talking to as many people as possible, getting lots of different viewpoints, learning as much as you can is very valuable.
And is it impossible to get your product procured by any healthcare institute, body, organization, or can I do pilots without this?
Yeah, so the pilot is an important consideration. So say you're a medical device or you're planning to be software as a medical device, you can do pilots without having your full certification.
Interesting.
Your full certification is when you're registered, and I'll just speak from the UK's perspective, with the MHRA, and then you can sell your product on the open market. But you can do pre-market pilot studies, so you can work with an organization to do controlled pilots, gather data before it's on the open market. But if you're doing a pilot, you still have to meet other requirements. And a lot of this is around data governance, because if you're doing a proper pilot, you're likely processing patient data on behalf of the healthcare organization. So you have to do a whole raft of things, including things like data protection impact assessments. And then generally, if you're working with an NHS organization, I'd expect you to meet what's called the NHS Digital Technology Assessment Criteria, or DTAC. And there's a bunch of things that you'll need to do there.
Amazing. Sometimes the value and kind of the great businesses are often in the unsexy things. So you went to what is considered a very sexy, hot topic, AI scribes, automation, to like the other end of the spectrum, which, like you said, a lot of people hate. They try to put it off, which is kind of compliance and regulations. And looking on kind of the Assuric platform, we're seeing companies that have embraced kind of regulations, and they've kind of become an advocate for pushing, the right registration of software and platforms and products to look after patient safety. And I appreciate a lot of founders in health tech aren't clinicians. They've come in with good intentions, wanting to solve. Saying that, the question I was curious to know is like, how did you go about securing your first customers, which is a common thing clinician founders face? And then how does that then translate to some of the bigger organizations that are doing incredibly well? What did that journey look like, and how did you change?
Yeah, firstly, compliance is sexy.
Yeah.
I was waiting for that.
If it's not, we're going to try and make it for sure.
Yeah.
I definitely find the space, like, I love it now. Maybe when I was first starting out, I was asking questions about whether this is something I really wanted to spend the next few years.
Yeah.
But no, I absolutely love it. And it's like you say, it's definitely kind of become even more important recently, especially with deployments in AI. It's really put a spotlight on it, because I mean, there's a lot of, for good reasons, kind of nervousness around the use of AI deploying. The pace of change is absolutely staggering. So some people are concerned by that, and you want to make sure that you've done everything properly when it comes to security and safety. So yeah, the use of AI, you mentioned AI scribes, has really highlighted the need to do these things. So that's one thing. And then the other point, so how do we start out? So essentially, we just kind of asked around and then found an unsuspecting early stage health tech company who would kind of let us do their initial DTAC, Digital Technology Assessment Criteria work. And we're essentially for free, and until we were doing enough good job with it that we could start charging them. And this is all without a software product. We started out, like, we just got started straight away, basically. There's an old, it's not that old, but there's a common saying that startups should do things that don't scale initially, from Paul Graham, the YC founder. An amazing essay to read for anyone interested in kind of startups and founding. But so we were just doing things that don't scale, wanting to help people really learn about the processes, gather information, and essentially start building and automating ourselves out of the work. And that's where we got started. So our first few customers, we were doing things very manually for either very little or no money, until we kind of truly understand it. And we did come from a good place. I think this is why it was a good fit for us, because I already was a clinical safety officer. I knew about the DCB standards and doing clinical risk management. I already had that combination of clinical experience, tech experience, safety experience. So even though I wasn't super experienced, I was confident I could do a pretty good job. And then Matt on the other side, he worked at Palantir, and he did a lot of work in kind of secure tech infrastructure, cybersecurity. He's a Cyber Essentials assessor, so we could cover a lot of the cybersecurity bases.
Amazing.
And then we kind of skilled up a lot in data protection, and also had lots of contacts in data protection like that we've found and built. And now I feel like I definitely know my stuff when it comes to data protection compared to when we started. But I think it's just as a lesson, I think you don't necessarily have to know everything or be an expert in everything in order to start a company in that field. Coming into something with relative naivety is often an advantage, and a lot of really successful companies have sort of not been experts in the field when they started something. They just come in to try and learn about it, see how it can be improved. So that's one thing. And then, of course, since we did things very manually for our first few customers, we built out the product more. And then we've just been going from there, really, kind of talking to more people in the space. Every time we kind of have a new customer or do a new customer call, we learn a bit more about what we need to build or what we can improve on. And I think we've just built some amazing relationships in the space as well. And that's helped us kind of grow reasonably organically, which is quite nice. And we've always been very product and customer obsessed. So we've not been kind of very aggressive on going out and finding new customers. We've been mainly really focusing on the customers we have and like doing a really good job there. And sort of, I would say I'm very product obsessed. I get very sort of specific about the smallest details in the product, which Matt would say is incredibly frustrating. But I think that's helped us kind of ultimately ensure that we're building like not just a useful solution, but sort of a very, very, very good solution.
What I love about you, Matt, and you mentioned that you're product and customer obsessed, which is like the way to go. Reminds me of kind of Jeff Bezos for Amazon. I remember like there were a few times early on, obviously we're in a few group chats where like people are saying, is this regulated? Are they not compliant? And you'd come in and be like, mate, fully compliant, check. We did it, right? And then you just kind of shut down, the haters, as you would say. And I was like, I love that. Because we used to be like that when like we had creators on peer and let's say they would just put something out into the world and they'll get a bit of hate or stick and be like, how dare you say something about kind of the peer creator or someone creating on the platform, right? And it happened once or twice. And then I think because you give so much value without expecting anything in return across multiple channels in person, like you are very quickly becoming the go-to guy when it comes to kind of, compliance, DTAC. There's so many acronyms that I wouldn't know where to start or where to finish, right? But no, I definitely see that customer obsession coming through. At the end of the day, we live in a world where like everyone is tech savvy. You want your product to be a joy, like a delightful experience. Conscious of time, the last question I wanted to ask was kind of like, where do you see yourself in the next 3 years? Where does Assuric go? Are you looking at international expansion? And tell us a bit more what that looks like, what you have hidden.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's really exciting because there's so many different opportunities about where to go, and that's one of the challenges about building a company. It's where to stay focused, what to prioritize. But it's exciting because I think even like a year ago, I'm impressed by the kind of the pace that we're going at, and some of the things like the new areas that I want to move into are kind of very much just on the horizon, which is exciting. But there's things I'm super excited about is definitely a lot around the software as a medical device compliance space. That's an area we're working a lot on, ultimately being an incredibly good automated solution for software as a medical device. So you can launch a new product, get it compliant in record time, get it audited. And then so we're working, and there's lots of detail in that. And we've got lots of cool stuff using a combination of integrations, AI, and all of these things to make that possible. So that's an area I'm really interested in. And there's other opportunities that we kind of didn't even really consider, but we're getting a lot of interest from NHS organizations, which I find really interesting because, and we have a number of kind of agreements and deployments with the NHS, and that it kind of looks like they have a different problem. They are essentially being drowned in kind of new suppliers, AI. They don't really know how to assess it. They don't know how to manage it from a governance point of view. They don't have the tools at their disposal. So in a dream world, what we'll build is kind of like a platform that say an NHS trust could use, and they could have complete oversight of all of their suppliers. So it could be like, we've got 100 suppliers deployed, 10 of them are AI. These are the biggest risks. These are the incidents coming in. We've got a new project. We do the assurance process in kind of very efficiently, and that's a really interesting area because there's a huge the amount of inefficiencies in the NHS. I mean, it takes startups a reasonably long time to get compliant, but the NHS, as you can imagine, is unbelievably inefficient. So, and this is a real problem. I mean, for example, you procure an EHR, and it can take years to actually deploy it, and that time is like it's multifactorial about those delays, but there's a huge amount we can do in kind of the assurance processes and slimming down that time from ultimately procuring a new tool to deploying it, and then the ongoing monitoring. So that's an area I'm particularly interested in. And yeah,
Okay.
and then also there's loads of other things as well.
I think that's amazing. A lot of these things open up once you kind of embark on that journey. You realize there's many problems to solve, and compliance is so big. And just touching on your point about EPR deployment, obviously, I remember we had a chat. I was doing that deployment. I was the physical bodies, going around a super busy hospital helping people. And the funny thing was, I was the only clinician in a team of like 40, 50 people. And you're just thinking like, wow, like, there is a lot more work needed to be done. And you kind of see from the inside why adoption is so slow.
Sure.
The digital literacy amongst the NHS is wild. Like, people struggle to log in, or they've been using the same software for 20, 30 years, and then something new comes overnight and they're like crumbling, right? They're struggling and the support isn't there, or like they're not reviewing things. So yeah, I think that's a nice direction to go. The final question we always ask is kind of like, any advice for budding entrepreneurs, founders that might want to pursue a path that, they're on the fence. You're a clinician, we're clinicians, the different thoughts you have, do you leave your stability to do something? What advice do you have for those type of clinicians?
Yeah, definitely go for it. Obviously, I feel like, you've just got to go for it. It's often can be scary to take that leap, but I think one of the nice things about working in healthcare, is generally there's always a job available. There's a lot of locum work. I know that at the moment it seems like there's less jobs available, so there might be some more uncertainty, but I think there's no downside in the sense of, if you're optimizing for learning and development, then if you throw yourself into it, you learn a huge amount, and the potential upside, of course, is unparalleled. So, I mean, I'd say the amount I've learned in the last 18 months, and not just the amount I've learned, but the kind of people I've met, the connections I've made, has been far bigger than if I continue to work in the NHS. And often it's easier to solve problems from the outside than from within. So definitely go for it, and then find a co-founder as well if you're seriously interested, because I don't think, I mean, some people do solo found, but I think that having a co-founding team is definitely an important recipe for success, and kind of just embrace the uncertainty, and just get stuck in.
Amazing. Awesome. Excellent sound advice. Thank you, Paul, for taking the time out. I know you're super busy trying to make the ecosystem compliant, but it's an absolute pleasure. It's always fun talking to you. I learned a bit more about your story, and a massive thank you to our listeners who are hopefully tuning in after a long time. They found value in this. So thank you, and enjoy the rest of your evening, buddy.
Yeah, thanks, Abdul. Thanks, Ams. It's been great.